like and leave a heart, please.
There we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the V-Door Locksmith Show. I'm your host, David Gibson, where we are unlocking the secrets to success in the oil and gas industry, one interview, one technical presentation, and one technical screw-up at a time. So if you see a technical screw-up today, please let me know what it is. Microphone's not working, audio, something like that. Typical run-of-the-mill stuff. But happy to be here on this amazing Friday. Thank you guys all so much for joining in. Please let me know where you guys are watching from. Also, let me know, what do you guys got planned? What's your summer vacation looking like? I've already kind of did mine a little bit earlier this summer, but I've got another one planned for the end of the summer. But curious to know, what's everybody else doing this summer? Also, what other events are you attending throughout the summer? Usually this is kind of the lull in industry events, but I know that there's still a lot of stuff taking place. So please let us know what's out there and what's going on, what's worth attending or at least paying attention to. All right, yeah. So let's get on with the show. Already got a handful of people letting us know that they're tuned in. Do appreciate it. So we've got Eric tuning in from sunny south of France. Always loving him tuning in from the across the pond there. We got Paul Moore with the guys over at Vibration Technology saying hello from the Permian. Thanks for being here. As always, our number one fan of the show, Mr. John DeWart, tuning in from Colorado. Thanks for being here. Then we've got Harry says good morning from the beach, Padre Island. Well, if you're out at the beach, go enjoy the beach. Don't be wasting your time on this silly show. All right. Jeff Chestnut says, Jeff Chestnut. Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Rita says hello from Los Angeles. Thanks for being here. If you're tuning in from Nigeria, Mr. Robert Carrington, greetings from San Antonio, home of Victor. I don't know how to say his last name. Go Spurs, go. All right. I think the NBA draft is going on. I don't keep up with mini sport things. So there we go. Femi, tuning in from Saudi Arabia. Thanks for being here. Thanks how I pronounce your name. And Terry says GPA San Antonio. All right. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in. Do appreciate it. If you guys are interested, as always, we're giving away a drill bit here on the show. This is actually red. It's not orange, even though it looks kind of orange on the screen. Not quite matching my glasses, but pretty close. If you want to win yourself a Gibson Reports drill bit, type in hashtag Gibson. Let me see if I can find it now. I got to switch over. Put hashtag Gibson into the comment section now for your chance to be entered to be able to win a drill bit. We'll give that drawing a little bit later in the show. Quick update, just because we're going to do this. We've still got the How It's Done series up and running, and I believe we're going to be able to make it. We've got to get approval, but our next episode should air live Wednesday at noon, this upcoming Wednesday. Wednesday at noon, we should have the next episode up and ready to run. So I'm going to play the intro to that, and then right after that, we will be back with our guest. All right, I already saw a handful of people being able to put in the hashtag Gibson. Actually, it should go that way. There we go. And if you guys haven't already, click the follow button, click the notification bell so you guys can get notifications whenever we go live for the show. And you'll also get notifications for any of the other nonsense that I'm putting on LinkedIn out there. All right. So yeah, that's it. We'll do the drawing a little bit later in the show. All right. I want to be able to welcome to the show. Do it a little bit different this time, but I want to be able to continue to give you guys a mix of the people in our industry and around our industry. So welcome to the show, Mr. Tim Race. Tim, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks, David. I appreciate being invited. Thanks.
So I know a little bit about your background, but obviously not all of it. So if you would, please share a little bit of who you are and what your background is, and how that relates to the industry.
Absolutely. Thank you. I am from your neck of the woods. I graduated in engineering from Texas A&M University, and ended up with going to the .com kind of high-tech space for quite a while. And then went to Austin for a graduate degree in an interesting field called science and technology commercialization. And that was opened the door to working with startups in a number of fields, from oil and gas, energy, space, healthcare, and others. And these companies are typically ones that are launching new technologies. They are generally led by scientists, engineers, technologists, and they are looking for funding either from their university or the government to bring these to the market. So I coach these companies in finding new markets and growing their businesses.
Excellent. So take us through a little bit of how that exactly works.
Okay. So in the advanced technology or deep tech space, a lot of this requires money that can't come from the private sector. So big kind of moonshot types of ideas, a lot of cases, sometimes they're small but impactful, but something that maybe a small company can't fund on their own. So a lot of times there's money from universities. Maybe the technology comes from a university called the Tech Transfer Office. Any one of your customer or viewers here could go to a university like University of Houston and say, what do you have from the lab that I might be able to commercialize? And you get an option to license and take it to market. So there's a lot of really interesting things coming from there. Other times, a customer or a client might say, we'd like to introduce this new innovation, and they'll approach maybe the DOE, Department of Energy, in this case particularly, and say, what are the challenges the DOE sees in the fossil fuels space, for example, or carbon capture? And if there's something that they feel their team can address, you can submit an idea, and they'll fund that idea up to $150,000. You prove the idea through the process. If it's of interest and you show that you could maybe make some headway through developing a prototype, then there's additional funding up to $1.5 million.
Wow. So what's the process there with the DOE then? You're just, how are you finding out the issues that they're having?
Yeah, so there's the program is called Small Business Innovation Research, or STTR, which is let's see, that's the one that's more tied to universities, and I'm drawing a blank on the abbreviation, but it is one that 1/3 of the money goes to a university partner. So I typically focus on SBIR. So a small business, which is
as we go through this.
Oh yeah, sure. Small business is defined as one that's under 500 people. They would go to the SBI. You can either go to SBIR.gov, which covers all of the issuing entities, the DOD, for example, the DOE. They are required by Congress to put 3% of all of their R&D money into the SBIR program. So twice a year, in the DOE's case, they release topics. And you can go to the DOE website, DOE SBIR website, and I can show you kind of some of the topic areas that they cover, and the release dates that you'll go and look for. So if you'd like, I can show you that slide real quick.
There we go.
All right. Yeah. So anyway, just quick, I think we covered this a little bit, but rare innovation is, I've been in this market for quite a while. I do predominantly DOE technologies now, and some international economic development. I saw you had people from all over the world, so that's great. I do go to some countries and educate them on commercialization processes as well. But the SBIR program is these three phases. I mentioned phase are kind of at a high level, but we'll go through them really quickly. the phase one is concept development. And so you have 6 months to a year to do this. And the range is actually 50,000 to 250,000. I misspoke, sorry. They've raised it. And then phase two, if your project is approved for phase two, you have 2 years additional and 500 to 1.5 million to finish the product. And this is different than a government contract. And I think that's an important thing to point out. These are grants. And so if you were to be hired for a carbon capture technology, for example, to design one for the government, they would own it typically in a contract. It's contract for hire, but the grants, you own all of the intellectual property. The government has to continue to buy it from you. And in fact, there's some other benefits there for federal sales. And that's the phase three. So that phase three is money that comes from outside of the SBIR program, but that gives you some additional rights that we'll talk about in a second.
Wow.
So just real quick, these are the lists of the entities that do issue this kind of funding. Some other ones that might be of interest to your market would be EPA, the Department of Transportation, and National Science Foundation has what's called open topics. So you can submit an idea, maybe an improvement for oil field technology, drilling, anything like that. And if they say, yeah, that sounds like a really good idea, then you submit your application. So for the DOE, these are some of the topics. You can see that they're pretty heavily invested in renewable energy. Nuclear is really kind of the core of what the DOE does. They manage nuclear weapons even and nuclear waste, but they also cover, you'll see fossil fuels and carbon management is probably a strong area for our listeners to look into. But these are basic energy sciences. If there's any computing companies, there's other ways that the DOE would like to maybe fund the listeners in your market. And the different colors signify the release dates. So if you are interested in the fossil fuel technology, you've got some ideas, or you want to see what they're looking for, you look in, I think it's February, the topics come out on the DOE website.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, so do you typically, I don't know if we can hear from the listeners or not, but I imagine there's quite a few innovators out there that are always looking to improve technology in the oil field.
I would say so. I would say that that's a pretty good read on who the audience is that follows here, is that we've got a lot of people, not just here in the US, but also, like you said, an international group that is looking to be able to advance the industry. I would say it's not the laggards that are watching this show.
Right.
It's probably more the front-running group.
Yeah. So the idea is to continue innovation in the US and get new ideas and give some opportunities for small businesses to compete on the larger playing field.
And how much paperwork is involved with this? Because I do know one of the things that has probably shied me away from, or even some of the other people that I know from doing stuff with the government, is just the sheer amount of paperwork that goes in with some of this stuff. Is that something that you help with, or is it just a myth? Talk to me a little bit about that side of it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think you're correct in that when you think of typically selling products or services to the government, it can be quite overwhelming. You're getting on the GSA schedule, applying for contracts and that kind of thing. This is a little easier, I would say, quite a bit easier. There are some hurdles that you need to get through, but because it's a grant, your main thing are that you need to be set up. Even a sole proprietor can do it, but ideally you're an LLC or an established company. You would typically reach out. Let's say you found a topic on MWD, which is how I ended up connecting with you.
Yep.
One of these was funded in that space, and you would send a note to them and say, I have this idea, or I saw this topic, ask them any questions, and they'll invite you to apply. The only paperwork you would need to do at that point is just make sure you have a good accountant, because the government has a specific accounting system for that. And then there's SAM's registration. You used to need a DUNS number, but I don't think that's required anymore. So it's fair, the barriers to entry are very low. The application itself is 10 pages plus a commercialization section, which they weight heavily. That's how are you going to get it to market? Do you have a sales team? Do you have support from a larger company or someone that might help you commercialize once it's funded? And you submit that as your grant. And that's really the end of that effort. The grant writing, yes, I absolutely help people write their grants, specifically on the commercialization section. But it's not too overwhelming, which is a real nice change for typical government interaction.
Yeah, because I could see how that would scare away a lot of small businesses to think like, oh, we've got to put in this much work for the potential of, getting like a very small amount, so it's having to weigh that balance of, just doing business as normal versus being able to, kind of shoot for that potential of doing something with the government there. Go ahead. Sorry.
I would say the only other thing is there are some technical reporting requirements but that would be just to get, usually maybe on a quarterly basis, you would send a report on the progress you've made against the timeline you put into your grant application.
Which isn't too far from, normal things that a business should probably be doing. We got a comment here from Robert. Says, I had the privilege of working on a number of DOE funded projects. The most successful were often those with several companies collaborating in a joint, I'm guessing there's joint industry project, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think one of the, and I think he makes a good point in that a successful grant will have what's called a letter of support, which would be a partner that's ideally, let's say you're applying for an MWD technology, a new innovation in that space. And if you have a letter from ExxonMobil, Shell, any one of the larger companies that says, we're interested in this, we're going to follow the progress. They don't even have to make a commitment. They just have to say they're interested in it and seeing it develop. That'll significantly increase your chances of winning, especially if you have 2 or 3 of those letters. So it is good to have them on the, available, either their venture organization, their tech scout organization. And for your larger company listeners out there, there's some benefits to partnering with SBIR companies as well that we can talk about.
Well, go ahead and let's jump right into it.
Oh, sure. So the interesting thing about SBIR is that because you own the data rights, and because even though it is a grant, it has the Congress made a really unique component to this where it acts as if it's a contract. And so future federal deals do not require anything to be bid out. You can sole source to an SBIR company. And so if any of this technology went to, say, federal tribal lands for safety of pipeline safety, for example, that money would go, if the company has invented something that fits that market, the government is actually technically not allowed to bid it out unless there's like substantial evidence, and that's on the onus of the government to prove that company can't meet the need. So if a large company then acquires that technology, the small business rights carry over. So ExxonMobil can act as if they're a small business on that opportunity.
Oh, wow. That's pretty substantial then to be able to carve out that portion of a market based off of a very small project.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say very small project. It could become big.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's, there's benefits, and, I don't know how much federal, opportunities there are. But again, it's money that you're not obligated to pay back. Hopefully, you develop something that has large commercial potential. You already have companies, say like ExxonMobil or NOV, lined up to commercialize this for you or acquire the technology, license it. So those companies have also first access, which is a great benefit to them, is they get to see what is the DOE interested in. They're getting essentially $1.5 million for another company to do R&D for them if they stay involved. So I think there's a lot of benefits for tech scouts to kind of be out there looking at who wins SBIR in this space, what the technologies are, and then reaching out to these companies to kind of get first right of refusal position.
So take us through a company that maybe you've worked with here recently and how they went through this process. Okay.
I can speak to the one specifically that I worked with you on. If that's, I don't see any problem with that. The company is Scientech. They are a partnership with the University of Houston. So the innovation came out of the University of Houston's research faculty, and they set up a company in Houston there that does a 3D simulator for EMT MWD. So that is it's a software play. They're searching for partners in that space. They've got a couple of large drilling companies that are testing it currently. And they would have gone through the same process as we have a way, or we believe there's a need. It's DOD had maybe some topic that related to that, and I don't know that offhand. You can actually just go to SBIR.gov and Google the company and see the topic and all of that. So it's really accessible to anyone that wants to research. But they would have applied to that topic and pitched their idea, their experience, and the grant was that they've now got a phase 2 grant. So they're testing it and they're ready to start selling it in the market.
Oh, wow. And so what's the normal time frame for that? I know that we had that on a couple of the previous slides, but what in actuality ends up usually happening there? Because, it's always one of those things where like, oh, if you think it's going to cost, $100, double the cost and triple the time.
Yeah, very good question. It depends a lot on the technology, of course. There's being a software product, I don't know, I can't speak for their situation, but potentially could have funded it with the first phase 1. It doesn't, sometimes technology development doesn't cost that much for certain things. Others could be require significantly higher investment. Some of the companies I work with, the $1.5 million just gets to a basic prototype. Regulatory, other things might require funding from venture capital or a larger partner, and so we help them find that as well. And those could take years. So it just depends on what we're talking about. This is not related to this industry, but you can imagine medical devices. Typically, this money doesn't go very far in terms of getting them to market. So what they're doing is trying to get to a point where they can get the technology to the next stage, which usually is more investment or licensing.
So as far as, once these companies have gotten past, essentially those first 2 stages and they've gotten to the 3rd stage of commercialization, what typically ends up happening with the companies? Are there any success stories that you might be able to share with us of what's happened after they've gotten the first 2 rounds of funding, did what they needed to do, and then, they just ride off into the sunset? Or what's typically happened at that point?
That's a really good question. I think it varies greatly. Licensing is a big part of the SBIR because some of these technologies require larger partners. So they'll typically be seeking licensing deals where they'll put the IP into the hands of a larger company and they'll collect a royalty. the big stories you've heard of one example would be Qualcomm. Qualcomm was funded by SBIR, large chip maker. And then a lot of them just have maybe a portfolio of technologies in that very specific industry, or they'll spin it out. It really depends on what your goals are. There are certainly a lot of companies that are just R&D, and they maybe have expertise in, say, electro-optics, for example. So they might do something in the oil field space. They might do something in with NASA. Sometimes they don't succeed at commercializing as much as just continuing to win these grants. So those are the unfortunate ones, but every now and then they'll get a licensing deal and get something spun out. But these are, again, moonshots. So a lot of times it's really difficult to get these to get commercial traction.
So is there a place to be able to see where all of these sit? Because maybe there's, because I know like with NASA, they'll have their patent library, right? That you're allowed to be able to, I guess, essentially just call them up and say, hey, I want to license this patent or do something with this. Is there a place for the people, who can see what's already been accomplished with some of these moonshots and then be able to reach out to some of those companies?
Absolutely. So the SBIR.gov has a fantastic database that will publish all of the phase 1 and phase 2 winners and their topic titles and abstract. So you can search keywords based on your industry and see what might pop up, and then you'll have contact information for the CEO or principal investigator that led the project. So that's a great way to find potential technologies that you might want to license or acquire that have already been completed, at least through the phase 1 or 2.
And so at what stage are you getting involved with these companies? Are you out there, going to, startup events and stuff like, in Austin and looking for, quirky engineers or, walking around talking to academia and stuff? Like, at what point are you getting involved with these companies to be able to help them through this process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I typically now get involved in companies that have already received an award. But a lot of these companies come to me through small business centers in each state. Some states, and I believe Texas has the SBDC, that is small business development councils, where you can go and get SBIR training for no cost typically. They'll help you find topics. They'll connect you with someone like me that can help you write the grant, find the topic, position yourself to win. And then there's another really interesting component to SBIR that Congress released probably about 5 years ago now, that is called technical and business assistance. And that's an additional fund, $6,500 for the phase 1 wins and $50,000 for phase 2 wins, that you give to a third party that is for anything but the R&D. So that money could be used for patent filing, could be used for marketing, sales, partnership development, fundraising. And that's where I typically get involved in, or do most of my work, is once they've been awarded, I help them either win the phase 2 and get that additional 1.5 million, or find and negotiate licensing deals.
That's interesting. So because I'm going through this process right now, as far as the patent side of it, do the people that are going through this, do they get to either cut the line, or does the patent office give them a little bit more slack, since this is essentially for the government?
It's the typical patent process. There's no, so a lot of people use that TABA money, called TABA technical assistance money, to pay their IP attorney, but you're still going to spend probably about $20,000 on a patent. if that's the route you choose to go, either out of your own pocket or through this additional funding. But yes, the government again is letting you operate as your own business. So it would be nice if they give a little extra for that, but the upside is the government doesn't own your technology. They still have to buy it from you down the line. So everything else is just like it would be as if you funded the technology yourself.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I just know that the U.S. Patent Office is full of a bunch of people that know how to say no.
That's exactly right.
Another comment here from Robert says some projects really require a much bigger investment of time and funding than DOE alone can justify. I had once proposed that the DOE and DoD and perhaps other government agencies fund a large joint industry project on development of high-temp electronics. Randy Norman said such interagency cooperation would never happen. That's such a shame. Have you seen that though? Or do you even think that that would be possible, that there would be some interagency cooperation?
I can't speak to it expertly, but I kind of would say that I think he's correct. And it doesn't seem that there's enough partnership. For example, the example I can best point to is the space industry right now is being heavily funded by not just NASA, but the Department of Defense and Space Force in particular. So that used to typically come from Air Force. And so you'll see quite a bit of money flowing right now for orbiting space labs and debris cleanup. Really interesting things, but it does not seem that the two agencies are working together, which I think is a bit of a disappointment. But again, that's from what I'm observing from the outside. I don't know that that's not necessarily happening at higher levels. But as an alternative point, for the DOE as an example, beyond SBIR, they do spend quite a bit to realize the potential of whatever topic is hot, and that topic currently is hydrogen. So if you're in the hydrogen industry, and a lot of the oil and gas businesses are calling themselves transitional energy companies now, and are pursuing hydrogen, mixing up to 20% in the pipelines. There's going to be a lot of hydrogen safety requirements, and the DOE has set aside $8 billion for that. And there's that money is going to go to hubs. There's a hub in Texas now that's been formed down there in Houston that will receive some of that money. And they will be using that money to expand hydrogen infrastructure. So while it's not interagency, to the point of the topic, it does to me show some, depending on the interest, that there is a lot of money out there when a new technology becomes hot.
So speaking of hot topics, what are some of the more recent topics that you've seen kind of pop up over the last maybe year, 2, 3 years, specifically in the energy sector, that the government's really been focused on? Okay.
I would say for energy, the DOE is spending quite a bit on hydrogen, ammonia, and ammonia hydrogen conversion, transport, sensors, electronic sensors in the space, carbon capture is big. And then, there's a little bit of solar and wind. It seems to be less funded as it had been in the past few years. It looks like, I would say currently the hydrogen and ammonia, there's some interest. I worked on a combustor for gas turbines that would combust ammonia. There's a lot of interesting things in the space for transitional energy.
Wow. I have to ask this: what about geothermal? Because that's one that's very. I mean, for a lot of the people that are watching this, are a lot of people on the that follow the show and myself are on the drilling side of oil and gas, and geothermal is one of those things that it's almost a 1-for-1 transition of drilling a hole in the ground is drilling a hole in the ground, right? A higher temperature, and there are some other challenges in there, but for the most part, there's a lot of knowledge and equipment transfer that can directly happen. So where are we at with that as far as what the government might be looking for and or funding?
I have had a couple of geothermal topics assigned to me, so they are there. I would like to see more, but in the example of Scientech that I mentioned to you, their technology is applicable to that space as well for directional drilling and geothermal. At least they claim it that it can be a benefit in that space, but it's not quite as hot of a topic in the space as I would like, no pun intended. Yeah.
So what if there's companies out there who, like Robert mentioned, being able to develop high temperature electronics, if they've got the idea and say, hey, look, our goal is to build high temperature electronics to be able to drill in geothermal applications. Is that something that they could go and pitch for from the Department of Energy, or would that be part of, you said, another group, the Advanced Science Group? I can't remember.
National Science Foundation.
National Science Foundation.
Yeah, but certainly the National Science Foundation is easy access for in what's considered truly open topic, and they have buckets, but you just find the bucket that's high temperature electronics or IoT. And that's fine. But even in the DOE, when I say it's, they release topics, they're not so specific, especially in that case, that I don't think you could find something that's applicable. So they might say either we're looking for high temperature applications in geothermal. They might not mention geothermal at all, but mention specifically Internet of Things or high temperature electronics. So I would certainly encourage anyone to look at the release topics in February. Actually, I'll have to go back to that slide and look, but they do two releases a year, and I would almost certainly say, let's see, they typically have.
Those will be released in February if it's fossil and energy management, but then that might also fall into something else.
Yeah, I'm sorry, released in November, due in February. But yeah, you could find that topic possibly in basic energy sciences, or energy efficiency would be applicable in fossil fuels and geothermal as well. So I would definitely say look at them, and you might even find one in DOD that high temperature electronics that you might it might not be in your industry directly, but could lead to a commercial opportunity for you in your industry if your company is specifically qualified to develop those kinds of technologies.
And so with this, we should be seeing a release essentially then next month for advanced scientific computing research, basic energy services, biological environmental research, and then nuclear physics.
Right.
And then any of the initial applications would then be due in October, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And those, again, I invite you to reach out to myself or look at your small business service centers, Small Business Development Council, or even if you're associated with the university or even a technology incubator, a private accelerator incubator in the community could potentially guide you through this process. But they can help you find the topics, get your company prepared to apply, and whatever else is needed.
Excellent. Now, I know you still had some other slides in there. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover with this while we still got it up?
I don't think so. I mean, that covers it at a relatively high level. I would invite anyone that feels like this is something of interest to go to SBIR.gov. There is a tutorial with some videos and short reads that give you a really good idea of how to apply, how to prepare for application. But again, welcome to reach out to me, and I can potentially guide them through that. And there's a lot of times you can get free resources early on to apply for the grant, because the upside for companies and these incubators is that TABA funding is helps you. Those people can stay on as your partner through the whole commercialization process, and that funding covers them as well. So it's pretty nice. Doesn't really cost a lot out of pocket.
Well, so what question am I not asking you that we should be aware of or should know?
It's a great question. I think it all depends on the reader and who I speak to. Most of the companies I work with don't have established sales and marketing. So, I would say that if you're a small business, highly technically oriented, it pays to spend some time learning how to approach the market, understanding how to develop your marketing plan, business model, canvas, or lean startup, and not to shy away from the opportunity to commercialize technology. It's a fun, exciting process. Again, many of your clients probably already have full-on sales teams and success in the market, but I typically work with engineers and scientists, and I want to see them succeed in the commercialization space. And I think I would encourage anyone to pursue the startup opportunities that are out there. It's great.
So then, from your expertise, what are some common mistakes that startups might make early on before they've got the sales team, before they've got the marketing, when they're trying to come up with that go-to-market strategy? What are some common mistakes, and what advice would you give to a company that's about to embark upon that journey?
I think the biggest mistake is the build it, they will come attitude and the unwillingness to do customer discovery. I think it's so important to talk to people that potentially will use your technology and be open to the fact that you're not correct, because it doesn't mean that you won't end up getting there or launching that innovation. It just might be the innovation needs to be pushed in a little bit of a different direction. But be willing to ask hard questions up front and iterate and release minimally viable products so that people can test them, give you feedback, and you can, I think, get to the market quicker with the right product through that process.
How important is it getting to the market, in how fast you get to it versus being able to work out more of those bugs in advance?
Like quick to market versus right to market, or
that's a great way to be able to describe to ask the question that I was trying to ask.
Yeah. Okay. I think opportunity is different. Sometimes the first to market, there's a first mover advantage. I would say that's less important, than a lot of people want to admit. Let's take the I guess famous example I could think of is Facebook versus I can't even remember the first one. With the early social media days.
MySpace, Friendster.
MySpace. The first to market advantage didn't necessarily help in that case, but there is a lot of opportunities, I think, in reality that it is okay to get to market, and you won't get right to market unless you're releasing an MVP anyway, I don't believe. So sometimes getting it there as basic as it can, getting beta testers, early adopters, and then continuing to engineer on it and improve it and add features from that point. So I think it's a process. It's keeping it in the lab until it's some sort of quote unquote perfect, I think, is the wrong thing to do. Almost in any case.
What advice would you have on, as far as getting your initial beta testers and early adopters? Can you go wrong with initial beta testers, or how specific should you be in selecting that group?
That's a good question. I'm sure you could certainly go wrong and have the wrong people, or maybe a partner or someone that could potentially steal your IP. So it's just, it's a matter of, you know, are you protecting your IP along the way? Is it a trustworthy partner? In the case that I work with, those letters of support, a lot of those companies are willing testers. They're anxious to see it, visit your lab, give you feedback along the way. I think it's certainly a risk, but I would say it's worth the risk, and just be wary of your own. Understand your IP position, what need to keep quiet, and then protect the IP like you always would. Either a provisional patent, which doesn't cost a lot, gives you a year of IP protection, and then mutual NDAs are always a great way to give you a little extra protection as well. But those, I am not a licensed attorney, so my advice is speak to your licensed attorney if needed in those cases.
So one final question for me. What are some of the things to be able to take into consideration when doing a licensing deal, right? I know this gets talked about a lot of times. You'll hear licensing deals on shows like Shark Tank and stuff like that. What are some of the myths behind that, and what are some of the more realistic things that people should take into consideration when walking into something like that? Because I know a lot of times you get into a business opportunity that you've never been through before, and you're like, all right, yeah, we'll do 20% licensing fee, or we'll do 1%. It's like, what's a good number? What's not? What are some of the things to be able to take into consideration as you approach that portion of the business?
Yeah, that's a great question. Licensing is a unique practice, and the strategy is quite involved. It's like setting pricing, for example. It can be a lot of educated guessing and heavy negotiation. I'm actually in a negotiation right now with a company in Houston and a small business in Colorado for licensing, and it'll take longer than you expect, so be prepared for that. I think a lot of it is intuition. Do you like the people you're working with? Is there a chance they could sit on the intellectual property, which has occurred? A company might license your IP and then not sell it just to protect something that they've got in their portfolio. So you would get no royalties. I don't know how common that is, but I know it does happen. So make sure that the company you have a good feel for them. They have a solid interest in seeing that technology succeed. And then the rates, like you mentioned, can range depending on the projected volumes, market size, but anywhere from, I'd say, 5 or 6% up to 20%. But there are some good resources out there, and that's the kind of topic I get in on a one-on-one basis, because it is so different for everyone.
It's a very case-by-case situation then.
Yeah, I would say so. And there's, like I said, there's some good experts out there that put a lot of information on the internet that can help you study and learn a little bit about licensing strategy. But like anything, if you can't afford it, it may be worth having a professional licensing negotiator involved, and that can help quite a bit.
Excellent. Well, Tim, that's all the questions I've got for you. I've got one other comment that's come in here from John Dulles, that MVP is part of the discovery process on what the market needs, as well as what it will, quote, buy.
Agreed. Yeah, getting an MVP is, I think, it's important to have it in the hands of people. It doesn't have to be the fully released product, but you can give good feedback that way. People can touch, feel, and test it, and it helps significantly in lowering your product development cost, I believe, over the long term.
Well, Tim, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing with us all about this. I'll definitely be looking at the SBIR and SBDC websites here for Texas and be able to see what other I guess government supported money is out there to be able to help small businesses grow. I know I'm a big fan of small businesses and the independents, especially in our industry. So once again, thank you so much. Really do appreciate it. Thank you everybody that's watching. Oh, almost forgot. Got to give away a drill bit. Let me do this real quick. Present, share screen. There we go. Share that. Put that up there, add to stream. There we go. We've had 14 people enter in, so we'll hit the drawing now. So for everybody that put in the hashtag Gibson on there, we'll be getting themselves a drill bit. And our winner today is Jeff Justa. Jeff, thank you for watching the show, sir. Do appreciate it. And we will get you a drill bit sent off. Send me a message on LinkedIn. Get your contact information. We'll get that over to Tracy, and we will get you a drill bit sent off. Once again, thanks everybody for watching the show today. Do appreciate it. I hope everybody has an absolutely amazing weekend. Let me see here. Where's the little button at? There it is. And as always, know your industry.